how YHVH became God. Let's start by looking at the name of this deity. What is his name? Is it the Lord? Is it the Eternal One? Is it Yahweh? Actually, does he even have a name? In our investigation, we must start at the point in time when the Hebrew Bible did already exist as a collection of holy books. That is where we're going to start from. That is the point where our investigation is going to start from. Now, when scribes began to write down the texts that much later were to be put together to form the Bible, they wrote only consonants, just as is the case today in modern Hebrew or Arabic, languages with purely consonantal alphabets. Now, in versions of the biblical text consisting only of consonants, the proper name of the God who appears in Genesis 2 and then very frequently in subsequent passages is written Yud He Wav He. And these four letters are the origin of the term tetragrammaton. Only much later, between the 3rd and the 10th centuries of the Christian era, is important, did learned Jews called the Masoretes, which is an Aramaic word meaning guardians, elaborate systems of vocalization to ensure the correct pronunciation of the sacred text. One of these systems that developed by the family Ben Asher succeeded in establishing itself as the standard one. I'll repeat that. One of these systems developed by the family of Ben Asher succeeded in establishing itself as the standard one. This is how scribes came into possession of a system with sufficient sophistication to allow them to add appropriate vowels to the words in a given text, of which only the consonants had initially been written down. Now, I must say this. Before the signs designating vowels were invented, it was possible in certain contexts to use some of the consonants to indicate the pronunciation. These were called maters lectiones, meaning mothers of reading. Maters lectiones, mothers of reading. Yes, so even though they were originally written in consonants and then vowels were invented, it was possible in certain contexts to use some of the consonants to indicate the pronunciations. And this is what we call maters lectiones. Now, let me give you an example of what the Masoretes did. Look at this word, which is just consonants, GLLWS. Imagine this English word. We would easily recognize that this word is gallows. So, we would represent what the Masoretes did as adding the vowels A and O. This is what they did. Let's look at another example. A written expression like FCLT could be vocalized in at least two different ways. You can get faculty or facility. If I put this in a sentence, how would you know to render it or to vocalize it as faculty or to rather vocalize it as facility? In certain cases like this, the Masoretes had to make a decision about the meaning they wish to attribute to the word or phrase. So, for the proper name of the God of Israel, they encountered a problem. What was the problem? Starting in the 3rd century, Judaism had begun to prescribe that the name was no longer to be pronounced. The name of the God of Israel was no longer to be pronounced. This prohibition is already attested in the translation of the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, into Greek, where one finds in place of the tetragrammaton Yud, He, Wav, He, either the words Theos, which is God, or in most cases, Kurios, which is Lord. Why this prohibition? There are several reasons. Within the framework of a monotheistic view, it is inappropriate for the one God to have a proper name, because if he had one, this might suggest that there was some need to distinguish him from other gods. That was one of the reasons. Of course, it was also thought important to discourage magical practices in which the name of God might be used. One of the 10 Commandments, in fact, demands, "Thou shalt not take the name of thy God in vain," which can be interpreted as placing an interdict, a prohibition, on the magical invocation of God. As a result, the Masoretes found themselves confronted with a huge problem when it came to writing the divine name. Number one, they could not change the consonant Yud, He, Wav, He, because the consonantal text was considered sacred and invariable. At the same time, they could not introduce the vowels that would have permitted the pronunciation of the divine name, because that would have been contrary to the developing theology of Judaism. This was the difficulty or the problem that confronted them. What was their solution to this problem? In order to have the possibility of correcting the consonantal text, they invented a distinction between what is written and then what is to be read. Having done that, they then applied to the tetragrammaton the vowels of Adonai, my Lord. This is very important. They took Yud, He, Wah, He, and then they applied to it the vowels of Adonai. This resulted in the forms found in biblical manuscripts. Yahweh, or Yehovah, depending on which manuscript one consults. What was the thought behind this? Why did they do this? Well, they did this in order to indicate that one was to pronounce the word Adonai or Adonai when the text contains the name of God, Yud He Wav He. I repeat that. They did this in order to indicate that when you are reading the text and you come across Yud He Wav He, one was to pronounce not Yud He Vav He, but Adonai. I repeat it again. It's important. They did this in order to indicate that one was to pronounce the word Adonai or Adonai when the text contained the name of God, which is Yud He Vav He. It was then a mistake to try to pronounce Yud He Vav He by using the replacement vowels of Adonai, which had been introduced into the text by the Masoretes. They did not say, or the intention wasn't that, even though they put the vowels in Yud He Vav He, the intention was not that when you got to a place where you saw Yud He Vav He, you tried to pronounce Yud He Vav He with the inserted vowels of Adonai. No. The intention was that when you come across Yud He Vav He in the text, don't pronounce Yud He Vav He. What you should notice is that they've used the vowels of Adonai, so rather pronounce Adonai. So when we have Yahweh in some manuscripts, the error resulted from a failure to understand this scribal practice. It produced a pronunciation rendered as Yehovah. And then this form was then reproduced extensively in translations of the Bible, which even persists today, especially among Jehovah's Witnesses. So is not understanding the scribal practice, the intentions of the Masoretes. That is what produced what we have extensively in translations of the Bible, the pronunciation rendered as Yehovah. The biblical text, however, mostly leaves traces for us. Despite the prohibition, the biblical text retains some traces of a pronunciation of the divine name. We have numerous attestations of a short form, Yud He Wah, which is found particularly in theophoric proper names like Yirmiyahu, which is Jeremiah, Yeshayahu, which is Isaiah, Yehonatan, which is Jonathan. This suggests that the short form of the divine name was pronounced Yahu or Yahoo, Yahoo or Yahoo. There is also a third form which is found in primarily in the liturgical exclamation Hallelujah, but also in biblical texts like these, Exodus 15. Yah is my strength. and might. He is become my deliverance. Isaiah 12. Behold, the God who gives me triumph. I am confident, unafraid, for Yah, YHVH, is my strength and might, and he has been my deliverance. Now, I want you to notice the combination of Yah and YHVH here in Isaiah. We can also find this combination, Yah, and then YHVH. We can find this combination outside the biblical text in an inscription, probably dating from the end of the 8th century. Although the beginning of the inscription is difficult to decipher, it is possible to make out the following prayer. It says, intervene on our behalf, merciful YHVH. Acquit us, Yah, YHVH. So both in the biblical text and outside of the biblical text, then, the short form Yah appears particularly in prayers and hymns. This indicates that Yah is a liturgical variant of the tetragrammaton that can, in certain cases, appear together with Yud, He, Vav, He. So this is what we have. We have Yud, He, Vav, He, Yud, He, Vav, and then Yah, Yud, He. The two short forms, Yahu or Yahoo and Yah, agree in that the vocalization of the first syllable is an A, and this makes it likely that this was equally the case for the tetragrammaton. There remains then the question of the vocalization of the second syllable in the long form, Yud He Wav He, and of its relation to the short form, Yud He Wav. What is the vocalization of the second syllable in the tetragrammaton then? To answer these questions, we must start from the only biblical text that gives a kind of explanation of the divine name, which is Exodus 3. But Moshe said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should take the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, for I shall be with you, yea, and this is the sign for you that it was I who sent you. When you take the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. And Moses said to God, behold, I come to the children of Israel, and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moshe, Ehye Asher Ehye. I shall be who I shall be, or I am who I am. And he said, so shall you say to the children of Israel, Ehye has sent me to you. Okay. Apart from Exodus 3, the most ancient testimony is probably to be found in the transliterations into Babylonian of theophoric names of Judeans living in Babylon at the end of the 6th century BCE. There exists some testimonial that suggests a pronunciation of the tetragrammaton like Yahweh, but the majority of sources speak rather in favor of the form like Yahu or Yahoo, because these are the names that we get, the theophoric names of Judeans living in Babylon Yahoo, Yahweh. So you could see that by the weakening of the A into an E, you get Yahweh. But we have Yahoo and then Yahweh. And the majority of our sources speak in favor of a form like Yahoo or Yahoo. The Israelites and Judeans who had been settled since the end of the 7th century or the beginning of the 6th century on the island of Elephantine in Upper Egypt called their god Yud He Wah, vocalized in proper names as Yahweh. Now we have a text that was discovered at Qumran that contains a fragment of the book of Leviticus in Greek, and it renders the tetragrammaton as Yah, Yah. But the Greek, or in Greek, Yah contains two syllables and is pronounced Yah, 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 which would correspond to the Hebrew or Aramaic Yah, Yahoo. This shows that at the time when the translation of the Pentateuch into Greek was undertaken, this pronunciation was current and well known. Yah, Yah. In Greek, it's two consonants. Sorry, in Greek, it's two syllables. Yah, Yah, Yah. This is confirmed also by Diodorus of Sicily in the 1st century. He writes, they say that among the Jews, Moses said he had received laws from the God named Yah. Yah. So, the ancient pronunciation of the name of the God of Israel was Yah. 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 It was a trigrammaton, not a tetragrammaton. So the tetragrammaton Yud He Vav He was originally a trigrammaton Yud He Vav. The ancient pronunciation of the name of the God of Israel was Yah. 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 You can say that. Yah. Sometimes Yah. Yah. So, in this case, when we look at the tetragrammaton Yud He Vav He, the W in Yud He Vav He was not a consonant, but a matus lexicionis, indicating the sound O. The letter H at the end of the tetragrammaton Yud He Vav He should be understood as indicating a lengthening of the preceding Ho. So you have Yao, Yao, Yao. So now, what is the most ancient documentation of the long form Yud He Vav He? We've seen the short form. What is the most ancient documentation of the long form Yud He Vav He? Well, what we have at the present, the most ancient documentation of the long form Yud He Vav He is found on the stele of Mesha, Mesha stele. It contains an inscription in the Moabite language dating back to the 9th century, and it describes the victory of the Moabite king Mesha and his god Chemosh over Omri the king of Israel, and his God, YHVH. The inscriptions discovered at Kuntulet Ajru in the Sinai Desert, dating from the 8th century, exhibit both the short form YHVH and also the long form YHVH. And from the 7th century onward, the Tetragrammaton is widely attested in extra biblical inscriptions. Now, let me say this to pique your curiosity. Was the divine name pronounced differently in the north and the south? It's possible. Why do I say this? Theophoric proper names attested in extra biblical inscriptions show other variations depending on their geographical origin. The majority of recorded names ending in Yao or transliterated as Yao in Neo-Assyrian documents come from the north. Those ending in Ya or Yahu or Yao are mostly from the south. This is why I pose the question, was the divine name pronounced differently in the north and then in the south? It is possible. So the original pronunciation of Yud He Wav He was Yao, 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 or Yao, Yao, Yao. The etymology of the name Yao might have been forgotten. It might be unclear. It might play no important role in the cult worship offered to him. And secondary, etymologies might well have been invented. From the point of view of history of religions, it is much more important to know what functions people assign to some particular deity than it is to know his name. I'll be presenting the origins of the deity later, but we know he originally came from the south. So Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh originally came from the south, from an Edomite or Arab context. So the Tetragrammaton might be connected to this certain Semitic root, which can mean to fall, to desire, or to blow. To fall into desire, they are tested, they are found in biblical Hebrew. To blow is not documented. It is conceivable that the reason for this is precisely a desire to avoid a form that would be too close to the divine name. Probably. If that is the case, and given our current state of knowledge, to blow is probably the most satisfactory meaning of the name. So, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh then would be he who blows, he who brings the wind, a god of storms, who might also have certain characteristics of a warrior and a desert god. This would accord rather well, as we shall see, with the primitive functions of Yao, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. It would accord, as we would see, with the primitive functions of Yud He Vav He. I guess this is why Julius Wellhausen noted as early as the end of the 19th century that the meaning blow would be especially appropriate for a storm god. So he writes, Wer dich die Luft erwriet. He flies through the air. He blows.